Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Academy webinar. For those joining us for the very first time, my name is Alina Bonadonna, and I am thrilled to be your moderator today. And of course, as always, I have the distinct pleasure of hosting another globally recognized food safety innovator, Patrick Quaid. How are you, Patrick?
I'm great, Elena. Thanks for asking, and yeah, really great to be here. So, and how are you?
Thank you so much for joining. And where you are based now, actually?
Austin, Texas. So since 2020, moved
That's
from
great.
pandemics.
Great. At my side, it's still kind of close to the end of the day. At your side, it's just the morning. So as always, we combine two sides of globe in one academy space, and I'm super grateful to see many people joining us today. By the way, guys, who are online, please let us know that you see us well, hear us well, so we can start our session. As always, just drop on the chat reaction or a small word in the chat room that we see that people are here. Yes, I see the first thumbs up, hearts. Yeah. By the way, Patrick, this is what I told you. This is to what you should be prepared after to get a lot of applause at the end of your presentation from our grateful audience. So, yeah. And as always, my huge thanks to Nemis Technologies for supporting our academy and giving me personally the opportunity to invite such experts in the field like Patrick itself. So, Patrick, are you ready to start?
I'm ready. Absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Then please share your screen. I will disappear kind of for a while. And at the end, as always, we have a question answer session. So prepare your hottest questions. See you
Does
later.
it look okay, Elena?
Yes, that look perfect.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, using real-time consumer intelligence to strengthen food safety. My name is Patrick Quaid. I'm the founder of iwaspoisoned.com and DineSafe, and I'm delighted to be here. Oops, okay. Yeah, the new reality. Your customers live online. It's where the first signals of product and outbreak issues now emerge. 8 in 10 use social media, and an average of 6.5 daily hours spent on the internet. This brings with it a new data ecosystem, which I'm going to spend time talking about. And there are benefits and challenges. And I just want to mention these right up front to be crystal clear on that. And the benefits, it's real time, rapid detection, large volumes of data, broad accessibility and reach, includes non-reportable diseases, novel detection, for example, toxins, and it can be an international, a national, and a regional view all at once. The challenges, listing a few key challenges here. Formal diagnosis is less common, lacks definitive food, can lack definitive food attribution, unstructured data, and accessibility. Why am I here? Just as a brief background, why am I talking about it? As I said, I founded iwaspoisoned.com. For anyone not aware, it's the world's largest consumer-led food safety platform. Anyone, anywhere, anytime can report a food safety issue. It's an easy-to-use web platform, and people report a wide range of things. I'm going to give a few examples here, just as a backdrop, as we start to talk through the rest of the deck. And the talk is about using consumer data or real-time data. So this, what we collect is kind of a proxy for what can be collected broadly from consumers, whether it's on other social platforms, your own platforms and data sources, which we'll talk more about later. But the things we see are clinical illness, you see CAMPI, or back to lab work here, foreign material, and these are examples where people will lead with a photo or a video, as well as report by text, combination of things. And, it'll have the location, the story, a full explanation, just showing the photos here for brevity. Product integrity, the top right, allergic reactions, process failure. You can see a chicken nugget that's clearly not cooked all the way through. Chemical contamination, so that's cleaning fluid in the lines of a soda machine. And beyond that, it can be sanitation observations and cleanliness observations, and even indications of fraud or perceived fraud, or indicators that might suggest potential fraud. So a wide range of things. And so with that backdrop, I'm going to talk through 3 case studies to see, how do we, I've described what we all know is people online immensely. There's absolutely a huge habit of, sharing, spending time on your phone. So we have that, and we have platforms like including I Was Poisoned, where people are specifically talking up about food safety or sharing it on other social platforms. How do we turn, and it's unstructured, with some of the challenges that we mentioned at the start. How can you turn this kind of what might seem like might be a mess of data into valuable signal? So these 3 case studies are going to help share that. So the first thing is crowdsourced data as a proxy for norovirus. So this is a study that we undertook in partnership with NC State University, including Leanne Jacobs, Ben Chapman, Rebecca Galter. And the notion was that norovirus is a very large factor in terms of foodborne illness. And we knew that at least some decent amount of the reports that we were getting related to norovirus. So because it's rarely lab confirmed, most people will just suffer it out, and then in 24 to 48 hours they feel better and they get on with it. In any setting, the lab confirmation is rare. So we're like, what if we took our data and grouped into 2 buckets, and those buckets being reports where both vomiting and diarrhea were present, and the rest. And vomiting and diarrhea being really strong indicators for being characteristic of norovirus. So what you're looking at here is exactly that. It's the percentage share of reports where, and the green bars being a proxy for norovirus. And you can see the seasonality in there. You can see that it dips like a decent amount lower in 2020 through the pandemic, with more hand washing and mask wearing and distancing. So that was phase 1. The next phase was to say, and I've got for August 1st, 2018 to May 31st, 2023. That's for a reason, because we chose the most official source for this data, which is CDC's Noristat data, and we were able to get data for that period. And we thought, what if we take exactly the same data period, and we Noristat has around 15 contributing states. So we said, what if we took this narrowed our data to the exact same time frame and the exact same states that are participating over that time frame. This is the results. This was presented at IAFP. It's also works associated with this at Infectious Disease Week. A strong linear relationship with official CDC data. You can see the red line is I Was Poisoned report count, the blue line is CDC outbreaks. A Pearson correlation value of 0.67, p-value less than 0.001, and Granger causality suggesting highly significant directional correlation. So the benefits of this are that our data is not just 15 states, it's every state. Matter of fact, it's global. And it's so it's a much broader coverage. It's real time. CDC data the lag can be anywhere from 1 month to 6 months in terms of when the data comes out. And our data, the Norisat data is a single data point for those 15 states. You don't actually even get to see which states it's about as Norisat is published. And whereas our data is literally to the zip code, to the store location. You know, and the value of that is you know, is really there for industry participants, for public health agencies that are interested in this data, to know if the circulation, if there are indications that the circulation of norovirus is higher. You know, from an industry perspective, it's an opportunity to enact heightened protocols in real time. You know, adjust, you know, hand washing reminders, employee health screening, things of that nature. Next, case study, Chipotle Mexican Grill. So many of you will remember the devastating food safety crisis, but I'd like you to take a look at this yellow band, which is over 2 years before their first major outbreak. You know, yes, our platform detected that first major outbreak in August 2015, Simi Valley, and most of the subsequent ones. And just on that, when I say detect, I don't mean, oh, we looked back and we saw that we had reports, you know, at around the same time. It's actually originating these outbreaks. The first signs come through our system, and because we have so many health agencies subscribed to our data, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, that's how these things come to fruition. But focusing back to that yellow band, that's our data showing that Chipotle's rate of reporting in those over 2 years leading up to that first major outbreak was 10 to 20 times higher than competitors. That's not 10 to 20%, that's 10 to 20 times higher than our peers. So it was an over 2 year long screaming early warning signal. That signal was missed. The impact, catastrophic. It was a 10 billion loss in market cap and a brand that took years to recover. And the critical point is that the data was there all along. This was a 2 year predictive signal, and it's a perfect example of using novel data to identify critical signals, in this case, systemic failure. Lucky Charms. So on the next case, so we had our system spit out a signal starting. It really came onto our radar in Q2 of 2021, but it was Q3 of 2021 that it really popped, and our data showed that it had, in that quarter, it was 44 times higher than historical quarterly average for reporting. So what that means is we barely got reports citing Lucky Charms, and then suddenly this huge spike. And just to be really clear, this is before any media coverage. It's 2021. And the statistical significance there is enormous. And we reached out to General Mills at that time. We did not hear back from them, but we did reach out. We try and do that when we can. We prefer to be partnered with firms so that we have the right channels to go to, and you know, and we can do that more effectively. But in a case like this, we do our best. We reached out, we didn't hear back. We continued to monitor that signal. It was sustained. So Q4 2021 remained elevated, Q1 2022 remained elevated. And again, this is before any media attention. Then we can do things like overlay like other cereals. So maybe this is a spike for all cereals. It was not. You can overlay all reports. Okay, maybe this is a spike for all reports. So, you know, using multiple techniques to kind of get a comfort level that this is like is not just by chance. Again, prior to media attention. ingredient challenges. In March of 2022, the earnings call, there was a statement that ingredients by General Mills, the ingredients coming into our plants to run our products is our biggest issue. In some of our products, we've reformulated over 20 times year to date. Every time you make a change, you have to change your formulation, a lot of work. On the right, you'll see OCR, which is optical character recognition. It's an early form of AI that is, I'm going to talk about AI a bit more later, but it's an example of the types of things that you can automatically do. People are uploading photos of their, of the product, and we use OCR and AI to pull out the plant information, the product code, and we identified that 95% of the reports trace back to the General Mills Buffalo, New York plant and Cedar Rapids, Iowa plants. That may not be, in this case, it's unclear to us if that's notable. Maybe that's the only place that they're made. But the key point is here that there's so much, when you have the data, there's so much you can do with technology that's available to us today in an automated, scalable way to pull out potentially really helpful signals. So what happened next? Media covered the story. Media covered the story, and we had over 8,000 reports. That's 8,000 reports come in citing Lucky Charms. Absolutely enormous. There was some critiques that that we'd heard saying, oh well, this is just confirmation bias or some type of bias. Someone saw something on the news and they said, oh, I just ate Lucky Charms. I'm sick, therefore I got sick from Lucky Charms. So just to help dispel that or make it clear that that's not how it works, we've got two examples on the right-hand side. We've got we estimated how many servings per day on average, based on data that we could find, are consumed in the US. Around 3 million servings of Lucky Charms per day. I'm going to take look at the top right, the McDonald's E. coli outbreak and recall 2024. We estimate around 17 million servings per day, much, much higher than Lucky Charms. There was a federal warning, a CDC and FDA advisory warning, and a recall issued. Massive media coverage, absolutely huge media coverage, much more than the Lucky Charms. Did we get a bump in reports? Yeah, it was less than 100. Okay, less than 100. Moving on to Jif peanut butter, salmonella outbreak and recall 2022. We estimate 21 million US servings per day. Again, CDC and FDA advisory warning, recall issued, massive media coverage on this. Did we get a bump? Yep, at less than 100. So the main message here is media coverage can amplify discovery, but it isn't sufficient on its own to generate large reporting spikes. So with this particular case, there was an FDA investigation. Microbial was ruled out. A chemical adulterant was not identified, which is not uncommon. That's much more difficult to do. But the key point here is that real-time consumer and social feedback provided an opportunity to investigate formulation changes, quality variations, and protect consumer trust well before regulatory involvement became necessary. Literally, like 4 to 6 months, early warning on that. And this is the key point here. So, who's already using this data? There's industry is already doing it. They're partnering with us. These are some examples where I'm just putting on the screen. Includes public, federal, state, federal, local health, and many of them are using more than just us. But certainly there's absolutely awareness that this is there's real value here. In terms of US public health participation, just as an example, we have over 500 agencies in the US. That includes environmental health and epidemiology, like as I said, state, local, and federal. Internationally, there's agencies from 7 countries who are subscribed. And the site operates natively in 7 languages and does automated translation. I'll talk a bit more about how we do that later. So, you know, and what this means is, you know, at the minimum, is that these agencies are getting geofenced reports for their jurisdiction. So it triggers investigations, it triggers, follow-ups, and you can form, you know, it triggers conversations with the complainants, and you know, the 72-hour food history, all the things that, you know, these agencies, you know, naturally do. It supplements their work. It's not replacing anything. It's a supplement to what they do. And lastly, the news media. The news media frequently covers stories on food issues originated by our data, and not just our data, but, you know, broadly consumer data. You know, whether it's from other social platforms. The model that historically might have looked more like, let's wait for the for, you know, a state or local or federal agency to speak up and then we'll write something, is not always the case these days. You know, the news agencies will do their own research. They'll look at data that they see online. They'll make their own decision. They'll reach out, but if they don't hear anything, then they will run, you know, on with a strong basis in consumer data, be it from outside or other platforms. So, you know, the message here so far is that, you know, I hope that, like, I'm conveying well, is that there's gold in this data. There's absolutely gold, and industry is already using it. Public health is already, you know, government health agencies already using it, and, you know, there's absolutely value in going after this to strengthen your food safety system. So I'm going to share some slides on implementation and what we, you know, some thoughts and ways to things to think about when moving forward if you decide to move forward with this. Starting at the ground floor, and this is just a general recommendation. You know, I'm going to suggest that becoming proactive is absolutely the way to go, but if you don't have the resources to do that, or it's down the road, or it's going to take a while to get there, at the minimum, from a reactive standpoint point of view, have a process and a playbook around consumer data. It's an absolute must. You can start on it today. It's a pen and paper. It's sitting down and figuring it out, and it can form the basis of what you eventually implement for a proactive approach. And a very basic step is evaluate and prioritize external platforms. I've got some examples on the screen here. You know, some hints. You know, yes, LinkedIn's a social platform. It's very rare that people will complain about a specific restaurant or food, and people will kind of, you know, there'll be 300 comments deep about where someone had a food safety issue. That's not a forum for that. You know, Yelp depends on what if it's a retail setting or if it's manufacturing, it may or may not be something you need to look at, and go through and say, for your situation, where are the places that people may speak up? And then it's understanding the nuances of the platforms. So in the case of our data, this only around 30% is available online. That's based on consumer choice. Consumers have the option to report but not show it on the website. So around 30% is shown. Some folks make a mistake. It's like, oh, I can just look on I was poisoned. It's a fraction of the data. That can also be true to some extent for Facebook. So if you're thinking about, oh, well, you know, it's like you want to figure out if like there's chatter about a particular product or a physical location. You know, some of this can happen between friends, so you're certainly not going to see some dialogue between friend groups. Some of it may happen on public posts. Okay, that's great. Do you know how to search for public posts? Maybe it happens on, you know, maybe there's a Facebook page that you have. Maybe the chat is happening on that Facebook page, or one of, or maybe you have several. Like, is it checking those? Is it a Facebook group? You know, there's some very active Facebook groups for for products or for cities or for towns. You know, can you join that group? You know, is that something you can do? And you know, or is it a public Facebook group or a private Facebook group? You know, Reddit. You know, understanding how to navigate Reddit. And so, you know, very simply, like making sure that you know, in the fog of war, you don't want to be kind of sitting around and saying, hey, does anyone know, does anyone even have a login to one of these platforms? It's like figuring out, make sure you have a login and you can go and look at this stuff so you can see what's going on. Yelp, Yelp reviews default to, I think it's called Yelp preferred or Yelp sort, which is not the most recent. So you have to select something so you can see the most recent. It typically doesn't have the most recent. They also have a section other reviews that we don't recommend, which is grayed out right at the bottom, which can have like really important information. That's it's just making sure you understand them. And this forms the basis of your proactive stance when you get there. Leverage existing resources. Okay, so you are all sitting, many of you will be sitting on data that is key to feeding into the type of analysis that you want to do. So you've got a customer care hotline. Okay, a lot of it is like, I got the wrong order, or the staff was rude, or maybe other complaints. There are ways, I'll talk about this a little bit later, to pass that out. To get the call transcripts, pass them out. So you've got like a stream of things that are food safety related. Reviews on your own platforms, on marketplace platforms, many of you will already have a social media team. It's a matter of working with them to have that, to figure out the right way to carve out food safety related commentary as opposed to likes and shares and stuff like that. These folks are seeing that data, and that's something to plug into. And then pulling your IT resources together, help aggregate this. Without turning fully to other sources, there's a lot you can do on your own. I'm going to quote Frank Downes here. The overall message is traditional food safety is change your oil every 3,000 miles based on a calendar. And that's important. That's absolutely important. But the real-time consumer intelligence is the check engine light. It tells you when and where to look based on the condition of the system, not on a calendar. So that's really the message that we think is critical here. And one of the things, the concerns we hear is like, oh, like I'm going to spend my whole life chasing ghosts. People get sick from the flu and they blame my product. That's something that comes up. So the important thing is that it's a rule of multiples. So one report, that can be critical. It needs to be noted and logged. It can form part of a longer pattern over time, as I've shared with the benchmarking. 3 reports in 24 hours, that's a pattern, that's worth flagging. 10 reports plus, like a lot of rich data, this is a signal to react to. Now, it's going to depend, like you would need to calibrate for your own organization, your own setting, but there's some form of this, and it's important, it's not about reacting to every singular report. It's really reacting to the clusters. And so what would an escalation matrix potentially look like? It's sitting down and figuring that out, and it's starting to look at this data, and it's a case of every setting will have its own unique aspects, and you learn to walk by walking. You start pulling the data together, you start looking at what signals you have, and then you kind of calibrate what it is. But it might look something like one report, non-specific, of less than 2 times baseline. So it remains logged in the database, potentially tag it with a SKU, it's owned by a data analyst. And investigate is 3 in 48 hours, or 3 times above baseline, or mentions chemical contamination, or there's indications of some kind of very fast onset. Maybe your ledger manager, review suppliers, check logs, belongs to the QA manager. A physical hazard, an allergen, EpiPen, indications like that. 5+ reports citing the exact same thing under 24 hours, maybe it's under 48 hours. So maybe you pull in like a larger, group of sort of notify a larger group of part of your organization, and maybe it belongs with the VP of Food Safety. So it'll differ for every organization, but it's really just about understanding what it is, getting to work on it, pulling the data in, looking at it, and developing this escalation metrics for your own setting. I just want to talk about AI at this point. Yes, not because it's trendy. I just want to check, am I still on? Okay, sorry, the screen looks strange for a second. Yeah, it's massive. It gives you the ability to supercharge what you're doing. This list is the things that are part of our everyday. And when I talk about AI, I'm not talking about copying and pasting into a chat, a chatbot or chat GPT and waiting to get an answer back. I'm talking about programmatic use of AI. In our case, it's image recognition, image labeling, video labeling, optical character recognition. I gave an example of all that. Severity detection. So if you have a lot of data, you can't, there are ways to kind of at scale determine with very, very good accuracy the severity of a report. Give indications of allergens, indications of physical contamination, anomaly detection, moderation. In our case, we use multi-directional language translation. Every report that comes in its native language, we auto-translate it into all other languages. So all reports can be read in, we have 7 languages. We translate currently every language, I think. We accept every language, and we'll translate into 7 actually languages at present. But for your use case, maybe it's more than that. All this stuff is at your fingertips, and it's absolutely affordable. Voice to text, letting people report, meeting them where they are. Like when people report, they're commonly using voice to text, so you can offer that if you're interested in capturing data yourself. AI reporting intake, conversational AI, and natural language processing. It's affordable and it's a game changer. And it's like I kind of alluded to a little bit earlier. It changes. It's not just like making something faster. It's changing what's possible. It's the types of things you can do at scale. So from analyzing 30% of signals, you can get to 100%. From reactive to proactive to predictive. Like these things are absolutely. And I mentioned the translations as well. So it isn't automation of existing processes. It's new capabilities. You do not need to use AI to get started on this. You absolutely do not. But when something looks daunting as you're starting, if something starts to look daunting as you start to get into it, know that these tools will absolutely unwind that, and it can turn something that looks really daunting into a huge scalable capacity to do things that you didn't imagine that you could do in an automated way. When you pull AI in, it requires new decision frameworks. So how do you validate a 44x anomaly signal before acting? When does AI confidence warrant immediate escalation versus just monitoring? And how do you integrate predictive signals into your existing protocols? So AI gives you new information, and you do need new processes to act on it. Lastly, the plumbing. when you start thinking about pulling consumer data together for your organization, the data pipelines are absolutely critical getting that right. It matters more than the algorithms. Because, as I said earlier, these are API-driven pipelines. It's not copy and pasting, it's programmatic. So, and most AI project failures happen in the data engineering, not model selection. It's not like, oh, I wish we had GPT 5.1. No, these all models are incredible, all of them. It's getting the data flowing in, having it aggregated in a way that is robust, and you can then start to use tools on top of that. So you cannot do this with like different Excel sheets and copying and pasting data. No, it needs a now, having said, you can start with that to start to see what to help you understand what you're looking at. But in the end, it needs to be an inbuilt thing that happens like automatically as part of how you run your business. In summary, we say that when we're talking about the future of risk detection, the lagging indicator, inspections, audits, lab tests, they're important, but where we're at is the leading indicator. So it's consumer intelligence, protecting the future, and it's don't wait for the recall. Listen to the whisper before it becomes a scream. And we finished a little earlier there, but yeah, from there I'll hand it back to you, Elena. And if there's anyone that have questions, I'd love to take them.
Thank you so much, Patrick. It was super interesting. And it was so cool that today you had like this technology-driven presentation, which will be kind of fulfilled with our next session already next week about AI specifically. So that's the best chain of the right topics, one after another. So I don't see appreciation to our speaker. Please drop hearts, claps. Let us know that you really enjoyed the slides as much as I did. Yes, thank you so much, guys. Okay, and while we are waiting for questions, I would take my first round, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So I was really curious, like you really mentioned that a lot of reports are relying, of course, on self-reported symptoms, right? But how do you actually ensure accuracy, for example, given the lack of lab confirmation or etc.? Do you have some validation? Yeah.
Yeah, it gets back to the clusters. So if you get your 10th independent household reporting independently about the same physical location in the last 48 hours, that's a really strong signal. And historically, that's correlated with some issue. That's been confirmed by environmental health or epidemiology. And even then, what we suggest when we see those clusters, it's not confirmation that something went wrong. It's confirmation that it's worth taking a look at. So it's really just calibrating how you think about the data. So like it's a single report. That's of note to build a cohort of history or baseline over time, but it's the clusters where it becomes like very, very powerful. So and as I say, it's the start of a conversation. It's the start of looking at it. We really recommend at that point. And for some folks, it's a lot lower when they see their second or third independent household reporting the same product or the same physical location. If it's a restaurant, that's where it's worth looking at. So it's okay that we don't know for sure if it was exactly those symptoms or even if it was that place. It's when there's a hit a threshold where it's statistically significant and worth following up on.
Okay, thank you so much, Patrick. Next question we received already from audience. How have local health stats you listed utilized that what you discussed?
Sorry, how does, one more time?
How basically local health departments you listed used the data you discussed?
They, so they'll get, every day they'll get uh, an alert of reports that happen within, that related to their jurisdiction. They'll get a portal that they can log into and see the reports that have come in. They can feed that into their own, combine that with their own reports that they've collected independently, and develop clusters using a combination of our data and their data. So okay, that was collectively, that was the third report we got, or fourth report we got citing this physical location. Or maybe they just rely on our data. It depends on how sophisticated they are and what they have. They will potentially direct message with the complainant. That's a feature that we have in the portals that's available to brands as industry as well as public health, which is why we think it's kind of a no-brainer for brands to get involved, to message with the complainant, to message with each complainant, whether it's just to let them know that you care, that you care about, and you want to learn more without admitting that it's actually, that it's your product, but that you care about food safety, you'd love to learn more about what happened. It's kind of customer care, customer attention, stuff like that. But for public health, they're reaching out to them to learn more through the 72-hour food history. And some environmental health any report that we get will trigger an inspection. So if they get a report via poison, some have a certain amount of resources allotted for ad hoc inspections. They drive them off our reports. So it's case by case. There's over, it's over 3,000 counties in the US, and they all have slightly different approaches. Or among them there are different approaches to doing that, and the same for globally.
And also very interesting, how do organizations itself typically integrate this EWP data with their existing QA, customer care, and incident management workflows?
It's case by case. So they have access to the same tools that public health does. There's an opportunity to have even earlier, immediate warnings. Usually the public environmental health is typically daily, but you can have a real-time alert. We have APIs, so it can feed directly into your own food safety system or automatically from our system. For some brands, it's a focus on the Chipotle chart, where you can see where they were running extremely high multiple of the rate of foodborne illness reporting to peers. We do that for all brands, so we know where every brand sits. So a lot of brands some brands are most interested in okay, where do we sit on the spectrum? Are we multiples higher, or are we multiples better, or are we kind of in line with? We have a benchmark that we run that is comprised of 10 we have a benchmark for everything, but for the restaurant side, we have 10 brands that are nationally recognized brands that has around 70,000 stores that we monitor, constantly monitor to see that the average rate of foodborne illness reporting that comes in, and then we compare brands to that. We also give brands the opportunity to create custom peer sets. So, okay, well, I just want to be compared to my peers. So some of them are laser focused on why are we also multiples? Because there are brands out there that today that are in this setting, that where they're multiples higher. That I don't want to say that it's an accident waiting to happen, but if you were to say it most, think about it phrase it more negatively, you might think this is an accident waiting to happen. On the flip side, there are brands that are doing, have incredibly low reporting, and it's in that case, it's an affirmation that your protocols are working. Some of them are in the norovirus. We can tell how does your norovirus compare? What's the rate of norovirus reporting for your brand compared to your peers and to the greater data set to say, hey, are we getting this right? Because this is something that really matters. So, and then of course, outbreaks, or clusters are super important. So that's some of the examples.
Mm-hmm. And also, I found quite interesting question regarding false positives. How often do false positives occur when using real-time consumer intelligence, and how do you mitigate them?
So we have to assume that that there's an amount of false positives in consumer data. Um, uh, there just is. But what we can also assume is that they occur evenly across all brands and across all products. We don't only get false positives for Lucky Charms, for instance. We don't only get false positives. They're evenly spread. So with that in mind, and with this cluster approach in mind, and this benchmarking approach in mind, it's okay that there are false positives. With understanding that they're evenly spread, it's noise, and when you have 10 to 20 times multiple of rate of reporting, like that's a problem. Like, are there false positives in there? Yes, but there's also false positives in the benchmark. So that's how you think about it. And then in terms of singular reports, they have to be treated that, like I think in one of the matrix I suggested, you can't treat a single report as like, oh well, that person definitively got sick. No, that's not where the value lies. It lies that data point is valuable for a historical, if it builds up and you see this, it creates this multiple. But on its own, the single report, you can't assume that like that was correct. But when you're working in multiples, trends, that's okay. There's still a lot of value there. And a singular report is also critical from a customer care and a customer recovery. The difference between someone who thinks they got sick and someone who actually got sick, neither of them are coming back. So there's some brands will say, hey, let's reach out to them and tell them you can't. People are delighted when they're like, oh my God, the brand came back. They wanted to know what happened to me. That it's such an easy for a company to to do that and really have this great kind of connection back to their customers, even after something like that.
Yeah, and it actually comes to next question regarding brand reputation damage. How how companies avoid reputation damage when early warning emerge, especially before media attention?
Yeah, so, sorry, there's one other thing I wanted to mention on the question about like the false positives. That's an important one. If someone reports, I ate at Alina's restaurant an hour ago, and now I have norovirus. I have vomiting and diarrhea. Well, they don't have norovirus. Either they don't have norovirus, or if they did, it was from something that they ate earlier. Now, from a public health perspective, they care about someone with vomiting and diarrhea. Okay, and they want to contact the person and say, hey, you don't give them the time period that they can't go back into work if they work in daycare, if they work in childcare, and stuff like that. And if you're a restaurant owner, then you may care that someone who just potentially had norovirus or norovirus-like symptom was just in your store, so they can still be there's like all kinds of unusual, unexpected value points even if a report isn't exactly perfect. Moving on to the question about brand reputation. People report things online. That's how the world works today. They report things on all of the social platforms, including ours, and that's that. No person today reads a single Facebook post that's negative and says, oh, that person, that stranger is right, therefore I'm never eating it. That, like, it doesn't, it's really, it becomes noise. Until you have like a major outbreak, yes, your brand will suffer from that. which is why we would love to be working with more brands to help them avoid that. So we don't want that. We don't want anyone getting sideswiped. And we have tools to help. So and we also consult, like, even if you don't want our data, we can consult and help, like, how do you start to integrate this stuff into what you do so that you don't end up being harmed. Harm can come from people speaking up online, no doubt. That's how we think about that.
But do you think it's more marketing problem or quality problem?
More of a marketing problem than a quality problem.
I mean, this reported brand reputation. I mean, when people type something in Facebook or Instagram saying that, oh my God, I got poisoned from this product, but at the end, it's a false positive one or something like this, similar to situation with Norovirus. So it's more marketing problem or or a quality problem at the end.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot to consider with each scenario, but yeah, that's true as well.
Yeah. Um, Also, I'm really curious, like, how do you see real-time consumer intelligence reshaping the next decade of food safety standards?
It's going to become like an integral part. I think Frank's analogy of, like, the um, the car analogy, which is where the historical way, which is like, oh, you change them, you have an inspection every, you do these standardized things that you do, like, on set time frames. I think not having that warning gauge there, like you do on a car, like, that's like, and Frank, I've also heard him call it infodemiology, which I think that phrase has been around, and it's had its ups and downs, that phrase, but I think that, like, that's just that's where this is headed. So, like, the notion that you can ignore anything that's not official will, um, those days are numbered, and it's absolutely not in your best interest as a brand to take that stance. That will eventually hurt. You know, that'll eventually hurt brands. If you decide to say, hey, because there are plenty of reasons to dismiss consumer data. There's many. You can think of all the reasons to dismiss it, but there are a few extremely strong reasons to not dismiss it, and more case studies. And like I say, we already see public health, adopting it, and industry adopting it. That's not going to stop. That growth will continue, and then it'll be it'll eventually become a best practice for industry. Whether it's mandated or not, it'll just simply become a best practice. That's our take on this, and whether that's and the notion that that it's defensible to have signals within your own house, that you're not looking at while people are getting harmed. That notion will that's not going to be defensible either. So for sure, systematically looking at your own data, and then also systematically looking at external data to build, like, a really strong position. And frankly, that it's going to cost some to get there, but we think that, like, episodically working on the most important things is actually more affordable than just doing the same thing over and over on the schedule. Like, so you can actually achieve more with less resources in the end. So we think, and lower your risk. Frankly, like, have a much better opportunity to lower your risk with this approach than you have with the historical one. It's more affordably. So that's where we think the future is.
Thank you so much, Patrick. And as far as I don't see any more questions, I would maybe ask you to summarize today's topic. What would be probably the key three, the most important messages you would love people to take out of from today's session and think through it?
Yeah, the consumer data is incredibly valuable. It's absolutely critical signals sitting in there that will help lower your risk. If you have not made a start on ingesting and thinking about these signals, today's the greatest time ever to start doing that, especially with AI, to kind of, like I said, to supercharge that. And you learn to walk by walking. Start. It may seem difficult, but once you get started, that's how you can learn. You can calibrate for your own organization, and they're the three things that I'd suggest. It's critical. It's not going away, and it can absolutely stand to lower your risk. Get started. That was 4.
But not thieves. Also, great. Thank you so much, Patrick, for sharing so insightful and important data with all of us today. And I do wish that everyone will share as much hearts as possible to thank you for your today's slides and presentation. And yes, so for today, we are done with our November webinars, but already next week in December, we will see each other at our next session and we will talk about AI in food quality. So wishing everyone who is in the evening time as myself now, amazing evening, and those who just started working day to have a smooth and relaxing working day. And see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thanks so much.